Hello there, and welcome to the channel. I'm Cassidy Cash, and this is the place where we explore the life of William Shakespeare and what it was like to live in turn of the 17th century England. Today, we're going to look at pregnant women for Shakespeare's lifetime and ask some questions about prenatal medicine right now on That Shakespeare Life. Shakespeare uses the word pregnant and even unpregnant in over a dozen places throughout his works, but he never uses that word to talk about a woman carrying a child. The process of having a baby may have been the same for Shakespeare's lifetime, but medical standards surrounding the care for women and unborn babies, including the doctors that were allowed to attend to a pregnant woman, were all very different than what we know today as prenatal care. Which begs the question of whether or not women in Shakespeare's lifetime would have had things like prenatal vitamins or even basic prenatal care. Were they seeing a doctor while they were pregnant? Did they have check ins? Did they have standards of things they're supposed to follow? I wasn't sure and I wanted to find out. So, to ask these questions, we sat down with Michelle Ephriam and Caroline Bicks, hosts of the Everyday Shakespeare podcast and researchers into the history of childbirth and women's medicine for Shakespeare's lifetime. And here's what they had to say.
Yes, there was actually, I'm going to refer to a book called The Complete Midwife's Practice, which was kind of a compendium of previous publications. And there is a section in that book. We don't know exactly who authored it. It was a number of authors, and people took from each other very freely at the time in terms of medical writing. So there's lots of plagiarism. But this was a chapter called How Women with Child Ought to Govern Themselves. And the advice was that women should live in a place with fresh air. This would be a problem if you were in London, of course. Someplace not too hot, not too cold. You would eat things like broth. Newly laid eggs are good. You would abstain from raw salad, so avoiding foods also that would cause gas, like peas and beans. Some wine is okay. Comforts the stomach. I was happy to hear that. So a lot of things that sound familiar to us. There was a lot of focus on digestion, cures for problems with digestion. You shouldn't go to sleep right after eating a big meal, for example. If you have constipation, you should take loosening syrups, moderate exercise, no riding on horses or in coaches or wagons, especially in the last 3 months, no high heels, no heavy lifting. Again, this is back in Shakespeare's day, so very familiar to advice that women now are given. And there was also a lot of discussion about what to do if certain problems came up, like a bad cough. There was a remedy that involved licorice and sugar candy and the syrup of violets, for example. If a woman felt a decrease in a baby's movement, you would apply a kind of pad or dressing to the stomach, a kind of linen sachet filled with ingredients like dried flowers to give strength to the babies. Women might have swelling of the legs. I think all of us who've been pregnant understand this. So then you might go on bed rest or maybe make a bath of chamomile or lavender. But all sorts of advice. Women were supposed to avoid great noise like guns or bells, and no excessive laughing or crying or anger. And here's a quote: "The woman's mind ought to be kept sedate and quiet. All melancholy news and frightful objects must be removed far from her, nor must anything that may cause sorrow be suddenly told her."
See, this sounds hilarious, but I promise you, when I was pregnant with my first son, I had an older generation of women admonishing me to avoid watching things like scary movies. So this this idea of being afraid while you're pregnant and that somehow damaging the child was a long held belief system.
Yes, absolutely.
And I love that they were dealing with morning sickness as well, and all of these indications of how to deal with digestion. And I feel for them. I'm like, oh yes, I know what that's for. I know that answered more than a few questions for me. And I always wondered if Mary Arden had particular foods she was supposed to eat or not eat when she was pregnant with William Shakespeare, the way women today are encouraged to stick to particular diets while they're pregnant. Apparently, that's a piece of women's prenatal history that hasn't changed, even if the food recommendations are quite different. If you'd like to hear more about women in pregnancy from Shakespeare's lifetime, including beliefs about twin births, midwives, and the lying in period for women who were about to give birth during Shakespeare's lifetime, you can listen to our entire interview with Michelle and Carolyn on our podcast at CassidyCash.com/episode 300. That's CassidyCash.com/EP300. While you're there, be sure to explore the detailed show notes for patrons of our show to see woodcuts, illustrations, and extra archival history related to pregnancy and women in Shakespeare's lifetime. That's it for this week. Thank you for watching. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.